Hello, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Kate Ertman and I am the president of the Rotary Club of Portland. Welcome to our online video weekly membership meeting. Our Rotary Club is a part of Rotary District 5100, as many of you know, and we were supposed to have our annual district assembly training at the beginning of April, which is where any Rotarian can get in-depth knowledge in a classroom setting on everything from how to write a district or an international grant, or getting training on how to chair different types of committees. And for those of us who are currently president of our clubs, we were to have a recap kind of feedback meeting with our district governor, Diane Noriega. So we ended up still having it, and we had it as an online meeting, as we all are doing so much today. And would you believe that we had almost 50 of our presidents attend that online meeting, which is way more than half of the clubs in the entire district, because our district spans the entire state, all the way to the state borders, actually goes up into southern Washington. And we know that though the past many weeks have been a challenge in so many different ways every day, there is right there another example how in our Rotary world, where this opportunity showed itself to have face-to-face interaction with a fellow Rotarian president who, honestly, many of them were not going to be able to attend the meeting in person here in the Portland area. Having someone that came from all the way in the Pendleton area and was able to attend online and join in on the conversation, I'm just going to say that that's an opportunity that we were able to discover because of all of this going on. As I saw on the Rotary District Facebook page, this quote, which is, "Rotary isn't canceled, it's just different." And I think we can all embrace that at some of those harder times when we're wondering where to grasp onto. That is the perfect way to look at it. We're not canceled, it's just different for a little while. Now, please welcome Rotarian AJ Barnett to give this week's reflection.
Hi, I'm AJ Barnett. Here's a poem that's famous, but I heard it on a Chevy truck commercial. When you're up against a trouble, meet it squarely, face to face. Lift your chin and set your shoulders, plant your feet and take a brace. When it's vain to try and dodge it, do the best that you can do. You may fail, but you may conquer, see it through. Black may be the clouds about you and your future may seem grim, but don't let your nerve desert you. Keep yourself in fighting trim. If the worst is bound to happen, in spite of all that you can do, running from it will not save you, see it through. Even hope may seem but futile when with troubles you're beset, but remember you are facing just what other men have met. You may fail, but fall still fighting. Don't give up, whatever you do. Eyes front, head high to the finish. See it through. Thanks.
Thank you, AJ. I appreciate you reading that. I'd like to welcome all of our virtual guests today. Thank you for turning into our weekly membership meeting. And I would like to extend a happy anniversary to everyone who became a Rotarian in the month of April. You can see the membership April anniversary list in the email that included this actual video link. And you can also see it on our website underneath the, again, I always forget this, underneath the membership header on the page. Okay, next up is Rotarian and past president Steve Watts. He'll be giving an update on our club's strategic plan.
Thank you, President Kate. Well, I just want to start off by saying, when I stepped in as president in 2017, the club really hadn't had a strategic plan that had been operating under for several years. And the last one that we had taken a lot of work, but really once we finalized it, it really hadn't seen the light of day, which was really too bad. My goal as president was to create a holistic strategy that would be based on the input of a cross-section of our club's demographics. Every generation, varying years of experience in membership, those in leadership of the club, those formerly in leadership of the club, those having never been in leadership, those from the public sector, nonprofit sector, professionals, employees, business owners. Really the goal was to have a plan that reflected our club and not just the club's leadership. We want to make sure that everybody had a voice. Another goal was to make sure the plan was simple, understandable, usable, and measurable. And the plan itself needed to be able to make a difference in our club, and it had to set the vision for the next 3 years, and it needed to set us on the right trajectory for the next 20 years. It would need to be boiled down to a scorecard that the board would be accountable to on a quarterly basis. And the scorecard was not really meant to be anything that would cloud the original intent of the plan, but was really to measure how we as leadership were doing at following and succeeding with what our mission was. So we began that summer, and our committee did meet the goal of being diverse. Many voices were heard as we move forward to formulating our future. And out of our meetings, 3 main pillars were arrived at that we were going to build our strategic plan around. The first of the pillars was activities. You can see it there on the screen. The first was activities. Further on down, you see membership. Further on down, you see finance. Those were the 3 main pillars. And of course, they're all interrelated. First of all, with activities, really what we talked about is how do we deliver Rotary to our members? We knew that the world was changing, is changing, and how do we modify our delivery of Rotary, the Rotary experience, to remain relevant now, in 3 years, and again, looking out to 20. And we understand that Rotary isn't just about lunches, although that's a big part of what we do every week. It's about service and fellowship. It's about developing relationships with each other, with our community, with our world. It's about making a positive difference. We also understood that the younger generations might not always have the largest pocketbooks, but they tend to focus more on the civics, giving back, rolling up your sleeves and digging in. We also knew that in our fluid world that many of us go through periods where we just can't make it to Tuesday lunches. So how do we stay connected? How do we make sure Rotarians stay connected when they go through those phases? Rotary has to be relevant and important to our members. So goal number 1, as you see here, was 1 social and 1 service activity each month. If somebody can't make it to the Rotary lunches, we will still want to give them the opportunity to be able to connect with fellow Rotarians and be a service to the community. So that was goal number 1 that we had. Bring Rotary to the Rotarians the way that they can receive it wherever they are. The second goal was to improve touches to our Rotarians by 50% in year 1. Now that ended up being a little bit difficult to measure, and I imagine that's something that will be reviewed when the next strategic plan is put into place. But really, we wanted to make sure we were reaching out to our Rotarians again in the way that they wanted to receive Rotary. And then thirdly was the measure of how well we were doing. And you see that there, the annual minimum engagement of 60%, including all Rotary activities. Now, really, from a rough standpoint, the way that's measured is on average, we wanted to see that the total attendance at all lunches plus all events, whether they're social, committee events, what have you, divided by the total number of lunches times the average membership would equate to 60%. So this is how we would know if the first 2 aspects of our goals were actually taking effect. Now, how are we doing relative to that? Well, growth has occurred. It's been fairly slow. When we started on July 1st of 2018, when we implemented this plan, we were at 40%. It's gradually increased. Right now, as of 3/31/2020, we're at 44%. So growth is very slow, but it's growth, and we're fairly pleased with that. One thing I would just say is that every Rotarian makes a difference here, making sure that you invite other Rotarians to be at the events. If somebody's not at lunch, make sure you reach out to them, make sure that everything's okay. Take it upon yourself to be a good Rotarian and a good friend, and make sure that folks are continuing to stay engaged. And if you see something that you think that may be able to improve engagement, please let leadership know. So again, we're seeing improvement there, not quite as fast as we had hoped. We are, just so you know, we're in year 2 of the plan. 2021 will be the year 3 of the plan. So hopefully we'll continue to see improvement as we move forward. Okay, so the next part of our strategic plan, the second pillar of our strategic plan, is membership. Obviously, this is a very important part of what we are trying to do here. How can we improve membership growth and retention? Really, I think the first thing that we identified is that over the years, we really haven't had a consistent approach to membership We haven't had consistent leadership on those committees. And it's you know, there's been some, you know, there've been people that have been hard charging and then they pull back. So there really hasn't been a lot of consistency. So what we decided as a committee was to change the job of the president-elect nominee from being the treasurer of the club to being in charge of membership. The treasurer responsibility would then be a non-officer position that was given to somebody in the club that had a financial or accounting background and could maybe be better use in that area. But really, we thought it was best that the president-elect nominee handle membership because that's so crucial to the club, and that's really putting your ear to the ground and hearing what the club needs and what the reasons maybe retention isn't as where it needs to be, or maybe why retention is good, but just being able to give that person the experience and that ear, if you will, to something so crucial to the club. What I would say is that this was implemented immediately with the strategic plan in July of 2018. And I would say that it has resulted in a coherent, stable plan, consistent new member additions, and is now that we're almost into year 3, we're now seeing net growth for the first time in many years. To give you an idea as to where we are on that, oops, let me get my piece of paper out here. Siobhan, could you go to that next slide, please? That one, yeah. Okay, so the total number we've recruited year to date is 30 new members. And by the way, the goal for the year is 30 members. And so far at 9 months into the year, we've hit our goal in terms of recruitment. So far this year, we've had 19 members resigned, 1 member passed away. The key here is seeing that net growth of membership is 10. And just to put that in perspective, so we started out the year at 210 members, we're now 220 members. You may think that, well, maybe that's cyclical. Well, I would say no, because last year at March 31st, we were down net 11 members. So we've actually had a 21 member net swing in membership. So I would like to say that the strategic plan is now starting to take hold. And so I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing with that. So the next aspect of membership, and Siobhan, can you go back to that prior slide? I know I'm having you go around. Okay, so the third aspect of that you see here is that 60% of club members are engaged in the club, oops, in a little bit of misspelling there, in the club by year 3, contributing to a minimum amount of the trust and participating in the club activity 60% of the time. Siobhan, move forward to the next slide there, the Venn diagram. Sorry, the Venn diagram, there you go. So what we talked about in the committee is really what do we want to see? How do we view somebody as truly engaged in our Rotary Club? Well, an engaged member is somebody who gives a minimum of $250 a year to the trust. That's good, but also meets that other requirement or the other designated target of being active 60% of the time with 60% of the activities that we have. That person defines what we would say is the engaged Rotarian. Now, we started out at the beginning of this strategic plan with 29% of the club being what we would consider to be engaged. Now fast forward to 2020 and we're up to 31%. So there is an improvement. You see in both of these circles, we see that there have been improvements as well. The net improvement is a 31% improvement. I would like to see that continue to grow. And again, what that is that's just understanding what it is to be a Rotarian and being involved. And every Rotarian matters. So the third and the last pillar of our strategic plan is finance. And one of the things that you see happen as the membership of a club declines is the revenue also declines. So as the nature of the club has changed, we need to make sure that the expenses also change lockstep with that. So the first goal that we had is decrease club expenses to be less than revenue by year 3. And that's something that I know the board continues to work on. The second one was to increase income by year 2. And that's, again, something that Corinne and Kate and the board are working on doing. And then thirdly, developing a comprehensive plan giving program in year 1 and implementing in year 2. This is our future. Being able to have a comprehensive plan giving program means that we can continue to build the corpus of our investments from which we can draw on to continue doing the great things that we do in the community. So very, very, very important part of the club's longevity. So those are the 3 tiers. And that's kind of how we're doing relative to the scorecard. You know, in developing the plan, we really got clear for the first time in a long time what was important, what we needed to measure, and where we wanted to go. The whole intent was not to necessarily be completely successful within the first year, but to have a vision, and to be able to have that vision also part of where we think that the club needs to be in 20 years, and make sure we're beginning to set that right trajectory. As I said earlier, the strategic plan runs through this next year under President Ruth's leadership. One of the things that President Ruth will be charged with is coming up with the next 3-year strategic plan. So if that's something that is of interest to you as a member of the club, raise your hand and let President-elect Ruth know that you would like to be part of her committee next year. That's all I have. Thank you for the hard work, and thank you for a club as a whole for the gradual improvement that we're seeing. And I'm really excited about the growth in membership. That's really, really key. Thanks, President Kate. Back to you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for giving that report. We've been wanting you to be able to do that, and I'm glad you're able to fit it into your busy schedule these days. And I'm very glad also that you mentioned that Ruth will be working on the next 3-year plan when she becomes our president of our club in July. And in her year, that is exactly one of the things that she does want to be working on. So do reach out to her, fellow Rotarians, if you're interested in contributing to that discussion for the next 3 years of our club, and how we are strategically going to continue to make this club healthy and to have it thrive. Now, I would like to announce that there are 4 spots on the Portland Charitable Trust Board that will be open by July 1st, 2020. To be eligible to be on the trust board, a nominee must have been a club member for at least 2 years prior to assuming the office on July 1st, 2020. Nominations for these spots are currently Shelley Kane Stockman, Kim Cash, Jana Cole, and Robert Kraft. Any further nominations can be emailed to our Executive Director, Corinne DeTorres, at Corinne, C-O-R-I-N-N, @rotarypdx.org. Nominations will close on Thursday, April 23rd, and the vote will be on Tuesday, April 28th. Now, fellow Rotarians and honored guests, on behalf of the Rotary Club of Portland, it is my privilege to welcome a new member today. Please allow me to introduce and welcome Jan Elfers, who is sponsored by Al Jubitz. Jan, would you please provide a brief introduction of yourself to our club?
Greetings, fellow Rotarians. What interesting times we live in, and I am just so privileged to become a part of this wonderful organization. I think service is in my own DNA. My father-in-law, Bob Elfers, was the president of this very Rotary Club some years ago. I am currently the president of Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon. We are a service organization that has been around since 1973, an ecumenical and interfaith organization that engages in direct community service, in education, and in dialogue. So we are a statewide organization currently working very hard to feed a lot of people who are hungry in these days and house people who are without adequate housing. So I'm just really excited to call myself a member of this club. I have so much respect for all of you Rotarians who also do so many good things in our community. And that gives me hope for this time that we're living in, that we will get out of this together by turning towards one another. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan. I actually have a really quick question for you, considering your experience and what you do in your work every day. Have you considered any committees that you might be interested being on in our club?
I have. You have, as I said, I have service in my blood. So there are lots of interesting committees that you offer. I'm particularly interested in the Peace Building Committee, in affordable housing, and in climate. Those are kind of rise to the top. So, but I'm sure I'll find my way to one of those committees for sure.
Fantastic. Yes. Well, many of our committees are meeting online at their regular committee times in the coming weeks and in the past weeks, actually. So you will have an opportunity before we all get back together in the Sentinel and start having our meetings there. I bet you'll have some opportunity. Maybe some of the committee chairs might actually reach out to you. I do want to finish, though, this induction, which is now for me to say, I want you to know that we believe becoming a member of Rotary reflects how you conduct your personal and your professional life. We all share your drive to give back, and I'm looking forward to you using your skills, as mentioned, and your talents to make a difference in our community, as well as connect with all of your fellow Rotarians. So everyone watching this, please welcome your fellow Rotarian, the newest Rotarian in the world, Jan Helpers.
Thank you.
I gotta get my little applause in here because this is what you would normally be hearing.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, welcome. And if you were here in person right now, I would be also handing you your official Rotary pin. But rest assured, Siobhan will be mailing that to you. And to Al, of course, who is your sponsor, we will be sending him or having ready for him to pick up a lovely bottle of wine as your sponsor.
Nice, nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person.
I am too. Thanks.
Now, please welcome Rotarian Patrick Galvin as today's Chair of the Day.
Thank you, President Kate. It is an honor to introduce my good friend and gentleman I've known for over 6 years. We are members of a group of professional speakers, a mastermind group. And Scott Crabtree is the perfect person to talk with us today about how we could cope during a crisis. He has a degree in cognitive science from Vassar College. He has worked for a number of large organizations here in the Northwest and outside the Northwest. Boeing, Intel, Hewlett-Packard, Nike, Kaiser, NBC, and DreamWorks are all repeat clients of his. And he is the founding principal and the chief happiness officer at Happy Brain Science. He's also a new author. I just read Scott's book, All Work and Some Play, How You Can Future-Proof Your Career Through Games. It's a wonderful book. I got it on Amazon. So if you're interested in what Scott has to say, I encourage you to check out his book. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton to my friend, Scott Crabtree.
Thank you so much, Patrick, and thank you so much, Rotarians. I am so honored and delighted to be with you all. You all do such wonderful service. And as Patrick, you said in your great TEDx talk, if you want happiness, service provides a path. How true. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you to briefly explore the science of managing transitions during crisis. It is a hard time out there. I know I am telling nobody news. Leading can be hard in the first place, and I think we are all leaders, whether you're officially managing other people or not. A recent SHRM survey, that's Society for Human Resource Management, asked thousands of people to identify a leader in their organization, and 85% of those identified were not officially managing other people. So whether you're officially managing other people or not, I think we are all leaders in this call, in this virtual meeting, and you know how hard leading can be. And on top of that, we are dealing with what some have called the biggest world crisis since World War II. This is not a normal time. So things are extra hard. So what do we do? Well, I'm here to give you as little of my opinion as possible and as much information grounded in science and data as possible. So these are sources for some of what I will go over with you today. I want to in particular draw your attention to the two books in the lower left by William Bridges, Transitions and Managing Transitions. Great books by Dr. Bridges, who's an expert in such matters. And all of these books, despite what they may look like to you, all of these books are filled with solid peer-reviewed science. I spent 6+ years at Intel where the former CEO, Andy Grove, had a quote that we often repeated in the meetings and hallways of Intel. That quote was, "Everyone has an opinion, some people have data." So I'm trying to bring you as much data as possible and as little of my own opinion as possible. What do we do during a massive crisis? In the brief time we have today, I want to focus on managing three phases of transitions. So Dr. Bridges has a wonderful model, and I want to warn you, here comes a fair number of words on screen. I don't usually like to show this many words on screen at once, but this is the model in one visual. According to Dr. Bridges, what happens is that change happens in the world. A pandemic arrives and everyone gets on stay-at-home orders, schools are closed, businesses are closed, etc. Change happens quickly. Transitions happen more slowly inside of people, and they tend to have three phases. But most of us human beings only want to acknowledge two of them. We acknowledge that there are endings, and then we quickly want to get to new beginnings. So we want to go straight from one job to the next. We want to go straight from one house to the next. We want to go straight from one role to the next, etc. But Dr. Bridges says every time you look at a change in nature, there is always this transition zone, he calls it. He also calls it a neutral zone, where it doesn't look like much is happening. So whether you're looking at breathing in and out, or tides coming in and out, or caterpillars turning into butterflies, there is always in nature this phase where not much seems to be happening. I'm not breathing in or out, I'm just kind of in between in a brief pause. The tide is not coming in or out, it's just sort of swirling around the bay for a little while. We tend not to want to even acknowledge this zone as human beings, and yet it exists, and all of us tend to go through it. And we are essentially in the biggest transition zone the world has seen during our lifetime. So what do? We manage all three phases of transitions. I want to dive in and look at each in turn, and then a few other tips, and I will take questions or comments from Patrick or anyone along the way here, and certainly at the end. So the first thing is to just understand that there is this neutral zone, there is this transition zone, and we are in it. Lots of emotions come through these transitions. Generally speaking, less pleasant emotions are at the bottom of this screen, more pleasant ones are at the top of this screen, and there's a mix of both, depending on who you are, what you're going through, what you're feeling. As the world as we knew it ended, let's zoom in there. We're dealing with a lot of confusion, a lot of reservations, a lot of frustration, a fair bit of denial. Unfortunately, we saw quite a bit of denial in the United States about how bad this pandemic would get here, which didn't help. There can be excitement and anticipation if what is ending is something that people want to leave behind. I think we have little to none of that in this case, where the pandemic hits and what we were leaving behind was normal, what the world used to be. So what do we do as leaders? We use a lot of open communication and empathetic listening to manage endings. This is largely about emotions and psychology. And what we need right now is to feel safe. So there's a very important body of research about psychological safety out there in the world. This initiated in academic research, and then Google recently emphasized it. Some of you may have heard of Google's Project Aristotle. Google has a lot of smart scientists and a lot of data, and they were looking at what makes their teams successful. They looked at all kinds of factors: gender mixes, age mixes, educational background, functional mixes, and nothing was really getting them significance until they looked at psychological safety. And psychological safety was the biggest, strongest factor in team success. So what is psychological safety? Psychological safety is a shared feeling of trust that whatever anyone is thinking or feeling or saying, within certain reasonable limits, such as you're not going to be a sexist or racist jerk, for example. Within outside those extreme examples, whatever you're feeling is okay. And that's basically what we need to manage during this ending and into the neutral zone. If we tell people, hey, snap out of it, be focused, just work full speed ahead like nothing's changing, well, that denies their reality, right? And it leads to more confusion. So we need to communicate a lot. I tell leaders, if you are sick to death of communicating, you are probably doing just about enough of it. So communicate, 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 communicate as leaders. And please note the big letters here. This is not just talking, this is listening. Science tells us that when we can label an emotion accurately, we get a better handle on that emotion. So some of the people you're working with, or some of the people you're trying to work with as they work from home in their chaotic environments with kids and dogs, etc., they may not know that they're feeling frustration. They may not realize they're in denial, but if you can help them name it, psychologists say name it to tame it as a way of getting a better handle on our emotions. So we're listening to people, we're trying to help them name and tame their emotions. And most of all, we're affirming that whatever we're feeling is okay. A bunch of us are feeling things that are not pleasant. It's okay. It's a massive crisis. Patrick.
Scott, should you do that one-on-one with your employees, or should you do this through sort of group chats? What would be your advice there?
Great question. I would say yes, any and all of those. So a study done by MIT's Human Dynamics Lab found that the best teams communicate frequently, energetically, formally and informally, and they bring in outside information. So that gets at the answer to your question. One-on-one, yes. Team meetings, yes. Hallway chats, yes. Virtual happy hours, yes. Any way you can get to it, do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And communicate openly. It's okay to admit that you don't know how things are going to turn out and when. So that's a look, a zoom in at the ending phase we've just been through over the past month plus. And it gets us to this uncomfortable middle zone that we are in right now, the transition zone, the neutral zone. I'm sure these words feel familiar to many of us. Anxiety. What is going to happen? Am I going to get sick? Are my loved ones going to get sick? Confusion. Should I be wearing a mask or not? Resistance. I don't want to shut down the economy. I want to hold Easter service or whatever it is. Lots of painful, difficult emotions in here. We don't even understand really that we're in this neutral zone. We're treading water. So what do we do to try to get to some of the positive that can come out of it? As uncomfortable as this is, if you look at the top of the white box there, tremendous creativity and innovation can come out of this uncomfortable transition zone, this neutral zone. How do we get some of the upside of this? Give lots of feedback, boost morale, and secure small wins to manage your way through the neutral zone. And by the way, as leaders, I'm focused more on what you can do for others. It's a very Rotarian message, of course. And as all of you know, serving others is a great way to boost morale, to boost your mood, right? So science backs this up, right? Science backs up what my friend Patrick said in his TED Talk. If you want happiness, service provides a path. It's absolutely true. Those who focus more on other people end up happier. So we're in tough, tough times. I know it's hard for all of us, including us leaders, but the more you can focus on what you can do for others, the more you'll help them and yourself at the same time. So I have other content that's for what we can do for ourselves, but right here in my short time, I'm focused on what we can do for others. So ample feedback. I happen to work with the state of Oregon, and I hope it's okay. I hope the Chief Human Resources Officer for the state doesn't mind me sharing. She was saying the other day, and as we were talking about a session I'm doing for Leadership Oregon coming up later this week, she said now is a time for compassion, not productivity. The black line running through these three phases is essentially productivity. So productivity is down in a neutral zone that we're in like that. A lot of us want to deny that. A lot of us want to resist that and like, no, I'm going to stay focused. I'm going to stay productive. Good for you if you can. But many of us will not be able to be as productive as normal, and that's okay. Psychological safety. Give feedback, give encouraging feedback if you can. Boost morale. Now that's easier said than done. And look, I am not Pollyanna positive. I am not like, oh, it's okay. We're in a pandemic. Just smile. Everything will be fine. It's not that, right? This is the hardest thing many of us have lived through in society in our lives. So look, I'm not about artificially pretending everything's fine, but you can find moments of happiness, bits of happiness, little bits of happiness. I'm having a moment of happiness interacting with my friend Patrick Galvin and serving you all doing this. Am I happy overall? I'm not happy that the economy's in trouble and we're in a pandemic, but I've got family to be grateful for. I've got this opportunity to be grateful for. There are things we can do to choose a bit more happiness, even in the hardest of times. This is not my happiness presentation, so no, I won't go on for an hour and a half or 4 hours about all the things you can do to be happier. But science suggests at a very, very stressful time like this, some of the top strategies include physical exercise, mindfulness or meditation, and as we're doing in this call, connect with each other as human beings. No, you can't reach out and touch someone right now unless you're living with them. And no, you can't hug them. You shouldn't even shake their hands, but you can connect over Zoom. You can connect over email, phone. We are social creatures. We need each other. So boost morale with things such as exercise, meditation, social connection, and then small wins. In these confusing times, what is happening with the pandemic? What is happening with the economy? Can we do our Rotary meetings online? How is this going to work? During all of this, we're looking for small wins. Harvard professor Teresa Amabile has a wonderful book called The Progress Principle. The subtitle of that book is The Power of Small Wins to Fuel Happiness and Engagement at Work. Might not have gotten that subtitle exactly right, but small wins are incredibly powerful. Look, for some of us, small wins right now are putting on pants with a button for the day or showering, right? So whatever your small win is, get small wins. I certainly consider this to be a hopefully more than small win, getting to show up and be of service to the wonderful Rotary Club of Portland. Thank you for providing me an opportunity to have a small win. Whatever you can do to give yourself and the people you're leading small wins. It's not a time to set big, hairy, audacious goals. It's a time to say, can you reach out to 3 customers and ask them what they need this week? Or can we move this committee meeting forward? Whatever small progress we can make, and then celebrate whatever progress you do have. These are uncomfortable times, but they can lead to massive creativity and innovation when everything is changed. So quick story, if I may, there's a wonderful video online of a rabbi talking about lobsters. You can look this up on YouTube if you care to see the original. But why is a rabbi talking about lobsters? He said lobsters are delicious creatures. Everyone would love to eat lobsters. I certainly would. But so lobsters develop a very hard external shell, right? Eventually, the lobster grows inside that hard shell until that hard shell gets to be too much. It gets to be too small. There's not enough room to grow in that hard shell. So what happens? The lobster gets uncomfortable. Sound familiar? Uncomfortable, like during a pandemic and a crisis and a neutral zone, transition zone like this. So what does the lobster do? It finds a very safe place. It crawls and hides under a rock, sheds that hard external shell, grows a new, bigger one, and then it can come back out and it has room to grow. The discomfort is the catalyst for growth. And again, I'm not trying to be too positive about all this. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna. But this uncomfortable time where we're all working at home and figuring things out, it is uncomfortable. It can also be a tremendous catalyst for growth. We can learn and innovate things about our businesses, our service clubs, and more during this transition zone if we manage correctly. So give ample feedback, boost morale, secure small wins to manage the neutral zone.
Thank you, Scott. Boy, I guess I was thinking about a lobster taking its pants off.
Sorry,
I
shouldn't
was
mix my
mixing your
metaphors.
metaphors there.
I'll go very quickly over new beginning because we're not there yet. We are not in a new beginning yet out of this. So come back here when we are in a new beginning. But basically, as things start to normalize, we will be in a new reality. And then it's time to help people through the ambivalence, the lack of certainty, help them feel a bit of relief and get back to more learning, higher energy, more accomplishment, higher productivity. How do you do that? I used to work at Intel, as you know. Management by objective is a great way of doing this. Set a clear goal, let people get there on their own, and reward them getting to new beginnings someday. But again, we're not there yet. We are squarely here in this neutral zone and transition zone. So I hope we get here, and I hope we get here before too long. But there's a paradox here known as the Stockdale Paradox, named for James Stockdale, who spent many years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. In the book Good to Great, he says this quote: "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. Don't be too optimistic. Look, I've got positivity in my top 5 StrengthsFinder strengths. I naturally run optimistic." But when he was being interviewed for the book Good to Great, James Stockdale was asked, so who didn't make it out of the PMW camps? And James Stockdale said, oh, that's easy. The optimists. They said, we're going to be out of here by Thanksgiving, and then we weren't. We're going to be out of here by Christmas, and then we weren't. We're going to be out of here by Easter, and then we weren't. And they kept getting their heart broken, and they died of a broken heart. Those who made it out of the prisoner of war camp had an unwavering faith that we would eventually prevail with no over-optimistic timing. And I think that's crucial here. We will get through this, my friends, but exact timing, nobody knows. And I would encourage you, do not start making promises to yourself, to your family, to your colleagues about being out of this by May, June, or July. Do not attach dates to this yet until we know a whole lot more. We might even be for multiple waves, and rounds of this. I hope not. I want you to keep the faith. I want you to have long-term optimism, but not excess optimism about timing. But to balance that, I do want you to focus on the positive when possible. Again, I'm not trying to put lipstick on a pig here. I don't live in some fantasy land, but we all have things to be grateful for. I am grateful for your attention and participation and questions if you have any coming up. I'm grateful for the fact that my family has a house and we're relatively healthy. There's a lot to be grateful for, even during one of the hardest times that any of us have ever experienced. So manage 3 different phases of transitions, especially this big, long, unprecedented neutral zone that we are in right now. And you will perhaps do better through all this incredibly difficult transition and change. I welcome your questions and comments, please.
Wow.
Wow. This is exactly what we need to hear today, Scott. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation. Does anybody here in our participants today, if you raise your hand up if you have any questions for Scott? Patrick.
Scott, you mentioned some things that you advised during this moment of stress, and one of them was meditation. For someone who hasn't tried it before, what is a realistic time commitment someone has to make to that to see some benefit from it?
I love this question, Patrick, because meditation and mindfulness can be kind of weird to some people who've not tried them before. So first of all, let me quickly demystify them a bit. What are mindfulness and meditation? Mindfulness is simply paying complete attention to the present moment with as little judgment as possible. That might sound easy if you've never tried it. And if you've tried meditation, which is essentially a mindfulness workout, you know that when you try to focus your attention on one thing and keep it there, what the human brain tends to do is, am I doing this right? Oh, shoot, focus, breathing, right, okay. Do I need to get milk today? Grocery shopping is scary. All right, breathing, focused on breathing. So our minds jump all over the place, right? So meditation is a mindfulness workout. It is sitting or walking, but typically sitting and trying to focus on the present moment with as little judgment as possible. Why would you sit there and do nothing? Because a growing mountain of scientific evidence suggests, and this is relatively new science, so you can take some of this with a grain of salt if you want. Some of these studies haven't been replicated, some smaller sample sizes, but a growing mountain of scientific evidence suggests those who practice mindfulness meditation enjoy better physical health, better mental health, self-awareness, self-control, creativity, quality of relationships, happiness, and success. It's like a laundry list of things we want, and they all come from meditating. Now, meditating is not a quick fix, and it is different for some people, challenging for some people to just sit there and watch their mind bounce around. Some of us tend to be action people. I'd much rather play a video game or clean the house than meditate, but I need to meditate because it's so helpful, which finally gets me back to the precise question you asked, Patrick. How much time? Any time. I literally mean 1 minute a day to start, or 1 minute a week to start. I was just reading yesterday about the power of micro habits. There's a great article in Harvard Business Review right now about micro habits. What we tend to do, we tend to take these big goals and not hit them and give up on them. Take the smallest goal you can. One of my favorite meditations is literally 1 minute long, and it is called Simply Be. You can find it on Insight Timer, which is an app for mindfulness that is free. It's a freemium model. You can find it on YouTube. You can find lots of guided meditations, some short, some long. Find whatever you enjoy the most. Practice it for as little as you need to start building a little micro habit, and eventually you might get to longer meditations that are even more helpful. Great question, Patrick. Does that answer that?
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott.
My pleasure. Any other questions? Steve?
Steve has a question.
Yeah, thanks for that great presentation. Very timely, very apropos for what we're going through right now. I have a question about boosting morale. I think sometimes people think that the way to boost morale is being optimistic. And based on what you're saying, being overly optimistic is not necessarily a good thing. So can you talk a little bit about ways to boost morale without overdoing the optimism?
Absolutely. So you're absolutely right, Steve. And I'll take us back to AJ's reflection that he gave us, right? That poem, that quote was not about just smile and pretend everything's okay, right? It's like, no, this is going to get really, really hard. If you think it's not hard yet, buckle up. It's going to get even harder in our country, maybe, right? So look, this is a hard, hard time. Optimism that we will get through this, absolutely. Optimism that we'll be through this by mid-May, no thank you. That's dangerous kind of optimism that Mr. Stockdale is advising us against, and science advises us against. So what can we be optimistic about? We can be optimistic about human beings and the nature of human beings. I mean, this club is founded on service. All of you give money and time and effort and passion to help other people. There's a bunch of good people in the world. I have faith in humanity, especially when I'm with the Rotary Club of Portland. And I hope that you all get faith from each other and faith in each other, right? So that kind of optimism that people are going to help each other and we'll eventually get through this, absolutely. And then happiness, you know, we're all different. So there's a variety of things that work for a variety of people. When I do a Science of Happiness presentation, I organize around 4 themes I will try to very quickly explain. 1, subdue stress, because stressed out brains tend not to be happy. It's a stressful time right now. So manage stress with some of the things I mentioned earlier. Exercise, connection with each other, mindfulness, even humor. If you can find something to laugh at, as we have a couple of times here, humor can help us manage stress. So subduing stress is important to happiness. Next up, practice positivity is all about positive attitude, but we've spent some time talking about this. Long-term positive attitude. Focus on the good stuff that is still around without being so like, ooh, everything's fine, that nobody believes anything you say, right? If as a leader we approach our people and we're like, just ignore that stuff and focus, everybody, everything's fine, just focus and be productive, it's gonna backfire, right? Everyone knows this is not normal. So Be positive but realistic, positive but validating, right? Completely validate the way things are, validate the way people are feeling, and then you're in a position to find some silver linings or some upside to all of this. Third theme, flow to goals. By flow, I mean the psychological zone where you're very, very focused. Flow is delightful. And flow, we get into flow when we're doing something challenging but possible and getting good feedback quickly on it. Look, we have to pay some attention to what's happening in the world, but not all day long, right? So sometimes give yourself a break. And the wonderful thing for leaders like us is that one of the best breaks you can get is to completely immerse into work, right? So find something challenging but possible right at the edge of your ability. Focus completely for at least 20 minutes, ideally closer to 90 minutes. And if you notice time starting to disappear, self-consciousness starting to disappear, it's like, whoa, it's that time already? Good job, you've achieved flow. Super happy, productive state of mind. And finally, I come back to relationships. Rotarians know this. Science has found that the number one factor in our well-being is the quality of our relationships with other people. So look, start with the people you are housing with, and some of you may be housing alone. I get it. I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. But if you're sheltering in place with anyone else, now's a fantastic time to invest in those relationships because you're going to spend a lot of time with those people whether you like it or not. So dig deep, bring whatever kindness you can and invest in those relationships. And then use methods and meetings like we're doing right now to continue to invest in relationships, even if you can't reach out and give someone a hug or a handshake. So manage stress, positive but realistic attitude, immersion into a focus zone called flow, and investing in relationships, 4 categories of ways to invest in happiness. And I honestly don't mean to be self-promotional, but there are hours and hours more I could say. And there's a bunch of free resources, including a recommended reading list on my site, happybrainscience.com, if people want to learn more about finding little moments of happiness in tough times like this. I hope that answers the question, Steve. Thank you for the good question.
I actually have just a quick question, sort of clarification. When you're going through the 3 phases and describing it, is when you're managing or leading a few different teams in the workplace, is it possible that either whole teams or even individuals on teams kind of feel like they're at different points of the phases? So I guess what I'm asking is, can we be at different parts of the phases than our peer that's sitting right next to us or that we're in a meeting with?
Another great question, Kate. Absolutely, right? People are different. We have 86 billion neurons between our ears, give or take, depending on what we did with our free time in our 20s. So that's immense complexity, right? And that means every brain on the planet is different, right? We all have different amounts of emotional baggage, et cetera. So if you manage a large team, or as you said, multiple teams, you may have half of one team that is still stuck in the ending phase, right? They're not even in the neutral zone with us yet. They're like, but when do I get to go back to the office? I've got plants I need to water. Or like, well, surely we can go back Monday, right? They're still in denial, right? Whereas other people are so futuristic, they're already in the new beginning ahead of the rest of us, right? Some people are like, well, the world has changed, right? Because everyone's comfortable with Zoom, we're going to be able to do more virtual events for years to come. And that's going to be really helpful for Rotary because, and they're way ahead of you, right? So what do? We try to meet people where they are, right? And that's why phase 1 is so much about listening. It's not like, I mean, raise your hand if you like being told how to feel. Nobody does, right? So don't tell people how to feel. Ask them how they're feeling. And if they can't seem to find the right words for it, still don't tell them how they're feeling, but tentatively test. Kate, you seem to be quite concerned, but also have bits of optimism. Am I reading that right? That's an example of how I would tentatively test what you're feeling. Meet people where they are, validate wherever they are, and then help them gently, one small step at a time through this curve, which in real life is much messier and doesn't have as smooth a shape, right?
This is perfect. Thank you so much, Scott. Does anyone else have
Thank
any
you.
last questions? Oh, we do. Jan, Please ask a question of Scott.
Thank you. This is an excellent presentation. I am wondering about in the transition zone, which we are right in the midst of, if you you're leading and you have people on your team who are anxious and you're trying to use this time to also be creative. How do you honor the feelings of anxiety and resistance? Do you allow that to just be, or are there ways to encourage creativity and innovation in the midst of the anxiety and resistance?
Another excellent question. Again, validation first, right? So if people are feeling anxious, I think what old school leaders would try to do is say, you don't need to feel anxious because this, and this, so don't feel anxious, right? And what more enlightened leaders do who know more of the brain science, what they say is, yeah, of course you're anxious. You know, to be totally honest with you, I'm quite anxious too. I don't know what the economy is going to do after the pandemic's gone. Like, is it going to bounce right back or not? That's going to have a big effect on all of us. There's lots to be anxious about. So validation first, Jan, and then how do you get to bits of creativity and innovation? I think you role model. I think you ask questions. I think you tell good stories, right? So in fact, some of the best innovations in human history have come in hard times with limited resources. So thankfully, it's impossible for me to breakdance on camera because otherwise someone might ask me, and I'm absolutely terrible at breakdancing. But breakdancing came from people who didn't have any real resources, right? They had a boom box and they had cardboard boxes. So what do you do with a boom box and cardboard boxes? Well, you innovate dancing on the street, and because you have a cardboard box, you can spin around and do stuff you could never do before. So that's one of many, many stories. I bet other people in this call and listening to this call know of artists, poor artists in Paris, or whatever the innovation is. When you are constrained, believe it or not, it is a time of innovation, right? The research suggests if we give you open-ended creativity, please write a piece of music. You might be creative. If we give you constraints, I need you to write a sonata. That's 3 parts, A, B, A. We actually get more creative. So we want to acknowledge how hard things are and then show with stories, data, optimism, questions, you know, some of the biggest breakthroughs ever have come out of tough times. Look at what came out of World War II. I mean, jet travel, radar, bunch of stuff came out of World War II, right? So this is a massive crisis. You may not feel as normal day-to-day productive, but it is exactly the disruption that's making day-to-day productivity so hard that injects new stuff into our lives and our brains and our work lives that just might lead to creativity and innovation the way it did for others who lived through tough times like this. I hope that wasn't too long-winded, Jan. I hope that helps.
Great. Great, Scott. Thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate you taking the time to share all this with us. Again, as we've all said, this is perfect timing, and I think we can all take this back, not just to our workplaces and with our workforces, but also with our families as well, because it does all come back to relationships, that's for sure.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, everyone. And I was trying to show you contact information, but my music started playing. I'm Scott at happybrainscience.com if anyone wants to reach out with other questions or anything else I can help with. There's my music again. Okay, it's stopping.
We'll make sure to have your contact information up on when we post this tomorrow.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all that you do for Portland and the world. I really appreciate Rotary Club of Portland and Rotary International. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I invite our membership to have a conversation with Scott on Facebook. So you can post a question for him, and I'm sure we can get a hold of him and find out those answers back to you and back to our membership really soon after we have this posted. Our speaker next week is Stephen E. Guire. He's the founder and president of Green Hammer, which was our 2019 Environmental Achievement Awardee. And he will be talking about sustainable homes and green buildings in Oregon. As you might guess, that then means that we will also be planning on presenting our 2020 awardee next week as well. I want to thank all of our speakers. Again, thank you for making the time to be here. And thank you to our club's membership, whenever, wherever it is that you may happen to be viewing this meeting today. I hope that you might be watching it with your family or sharing the video with your friends so that they can not only understand what Rotary is, but what Rotary does in fellowship and in service. A quick reminder to our members to make sure to read through your Spokes newsletter, which you get in your email at the end of each and every week. That's where you'll find a list of up-to-date service committee opportunities, as well as some additional meeting information about when club committees are meeting now. Most of them are meeting online, and perhaps you might realize this is the perfect time to join one of those committees. As always, take care of you, take care of yours. Let's continue our fellowship with each other. Let's commit to taking 10 minutes every couple days. Reach out to folks who are on the anniversary list and thank them for their years of service. Reach out to anyone that you might not have seen in a while, which is, I guess, pretty much everybody in the club, but find someone on there that you might have a little bit of a relationship with and check in on them, see how they're doing in the midst of all this. And as we have learned over these past couple weeks, just that little action, that might lift yourself up a bit too. So thank you all for joining us today. This meeting is adjourned.